firestorm of October 2017, many landowners had large areas of burned vegetation on their lands. Many trees, especially conifers, were dead, while other trees, such as oaks or chaparral, resprouted. Managers from several land preserves that burned share their stories with us of what they assessed following the fire, what actions they took, and what continued actions they are using to manage for fire.
The fire moved out of the northeast, coming down from the Mayacamas. It burned really hot through the chaparral and knobcone pine forest, as, of course, those vegetation types like to burn. It cooled down a little bit once it moved into our oak woodland with its grass understory, but also rip-roared down the riparian forest due to topographically aligned winds. The oak woodland at Glen Oaks was really harmed by the fire. A lot of mature oak trees just outright died from the fire, and a lot of trees were injured and have since succumbed to rot and drought. But in some areas, especially in the chaparral and knobcone pine, the fire really renewed the ecosystems. After fire, we saw a real increase in the diversity and abundance of plants, including a rare plant, Sonoma ceanothus. In wild areas, we waited until the next spring to see what survived and what had died. Dead trees play a really important role as land recovers from wildfire, especially that first winter after fire when soils are very erodible and really sensitive to being driven on or worked in. We thought about replanting, but instead of replanting, one thing we did was cage a bunch of oak seedlings. We caged 50 oak seedlings and left 50 uncaged, and 5 years later we have found 80% of the caged seedlings survived. And so if you're looking to promote oak regeneration to replace the trees that have died from fire, I highly recommend deer browse protection. We believe that by choosing the time and place that fire happens through prescribed burning or pile burning, we can avoid some of the worst outcomes that come with unplanned wildfire. Pile burning is really one of our most important tools when we're doing this defensible space and forest health work. If we just thin away ladder fuels and brush and leave them lying there and don't get rid of the fuel somehow by either burning it, chipping it, or hauling it off site, we won't have achieved our goal. And without removing that fuel, fire would burn just as hot through those areas as if we hadn't done anything at all.
We determined that the fire severity was low, landslide potential according to the model was low, and in addition, in our forested areas, we could see that a lot of the trees were still alive. The root balls were still holding the soil together. There was a lot of canopy cover that protected the underlying soils from the impact of rain. So we didn't really feel that we need to do any erosion control measures. Some of the post-fire recovery projects that we implemented were focused on forest health and invasive species management. The landslide potential was not super high. There were a lot of particularly fire-resistant oaks and redwoods that were still alive and could stump sprout or seed. So we really weren't worried about the area being revegetated. We didn't do any outplanting at all. We also did forest health, and so that involved thinning the forest, so taking out everything that was 10 inches and under, all the Douglas firs, living or dead, taking out all the dead vegetation, thinning the base. So when the bay trees burn, they resprout profusely at the base. So you could let that grow over time. A leader's gonna take over and crowd out the other stump sprouts. But we just gave it a jump start by thinning a bay from 20 sprouts to just 1 or 2 leaders. For example, on an oak tree, that you clear all the side limbs from 10 feet to the ground. And so that way fire has less of a pathway to jump from your ground materials up to the canopy of the tree.
Removing the dead trees makes it easier and safer and less costly to do post-treatment work, such as tree planting and erosion control. Salvaging the large wood can disturb the soil and break up potential hydrophobic soils. It can also create nursery sites, meaning leaving limbs and large wood chunks that can capture moisture and topsoil where young trees like to grow. Timber harvesting salvage operations can be done for a number of conditions that lead the timber condition in a substantially damaged condition. And that can be from fire or insects, wind, or a disease. And typically it is very much like a standard timber harvest operation, except that there is a CEQA exemption called an emergency notice of timber operations for those types of projects in order to get into action quickly.
As a landowner, I like to see a forest that has a fairly clean forest floor, free of most dead material. I like to see trees limbed up 10 feet, and I like to see a reduced density in the forest.
I would say the most lasting impact of the fire on the Land Trust and Glen Oaks Ranch has just been a renewed commitment to stewarding our communities and forests against the harm that severe unplanned wildfire can bring.
Following a fire, you may look at your land and see a complete mess. Lots of burned trees, lots of dead vegetation. However, there are many steps you can take to improve your property and fireproof it for the future. We'd like to acknowledge the agencies that provided the funding for these videos, the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. If you would like to learn more on these subjects, please visit our website.